Well, I've been making a lot of reactions to college football recently, and since I started this channel. This week I've been doing a lot of reactions to the highlights of the bowl matches in college football, and it's been so exciting. I'm like just absolutely loving everything about college football, from the action on the park to all the traditions and everything off the park. And one of the things I've been most impressed with off the park is the stadiums that these teams play in. So one of my viewers asked me if I can make a reaction to this. It's the Big Ten college football stadiums. So really looking forward to finding out more about some more stadiums in college football. And yeah, I'm prepared to be impressed as always.
Up until now, I had been going through the FBS conferences in a completely random order. But due to overwhelming demand, I've had to make the executive decision that allows the Big Ten to jump the queue. Actually, I don't think you say queue in America, so to cut the line, I guess. Combined,
And let me know more about the different conferences. Obviously, I made a reaction to the best stadiums in the SEC, and I know that's the Southeastern Conference. How are the other conferences? Is it just geographically they're split by? And what does the Big Ten actually refer to? Where? Is it a certain location?
the Big Ten stadiums have a capacity of around 1 million. But that doesn't mean that the average capacity is 100,000. No, because there are of course 14 teams. As you'd
There's 14 teams in the Big Ten.
expect with a name like Big Ten.
Yeah.
Anyway, here are the Big Ten college football stadiums. Beaver Stadium, home of the Penn State Nittany Lions. The stadium
That
is
is
named
beautiful.
after James, a beaver who built the stadium. Most beavers build dams, but in this area of Pennsylvania, they're a little more sophisticated. That might not actually be true. The thing I love most about this stadium is that the expansions that have occurred over the years are very conspicuous. You can basically see how
Yeah.
every section has been expanded.
Yeah, you can see it's been
And you've got a
constructed
bit
there.
of everything sprinkled in. I particularly like the design of each end zone. In the north, you have this big curved upper deck that hovers above the lower bowl, which is a fairly uncommon design. And the south end zone seating is similar to that of LSU's Tiger Stadium.
Yeah, I love this stadium, man. I know that Penn State are like quite an iconic team, even for a college team. Like that's a team that I had heard of when I was a young child, not even knowing anything about American football. I've heard of Penn State, but look at this stadium. That one big flat stand there. I can only imagine during a match that would just be amazing. The atmosphere. This is just a sort of intimidating tall stand. Really a perfect stadium for football.
Looks great. The stadium is set for a major renovation that will bring it into the 21st century.
Wow.
Because although it
that.
looks good on the outside, there are some aspects where it's lacking on the inside. Camp Randall Stadium, home of the Wisconsin Badgers.
That location
It's the oldest
was nice
stadium
too.
in the Big Ten. In fact, it's named after the Union Army training camp that occupied the site during the Civil War. I'm not usually a big fan of wars, but at least they kept it civil.
Civil. What is this building here? That's a very interesting building that's attached to the stadium. That looks almost like a church or something like that with these windows, but I don't think I've ever seen a full building that protrudes from a stadium like that. But again, I love the symmetry of this one here. It is a perfect bowl, and I like the sort of architecture around here too.
This one is another stadium that has a lot going on.
What's this big thing here?
Well, most of the capacity comes from the main seating bowl once again, which is fairly plain and simple. But then you have this sizable upper deck on the western side that curves its way around, matched with the skybox equivalent on the east. The exterior is also completely different on each side of the stadium. And it's not something I usually mention, but they have a very fancy looking field house as well.
Field house? What's a field house? Is that building? But I don't know what a field house actually
Maryland
is.
Stadium, home of the Maryland Terrapins. If, like me, you were wondering what a terrapin is,
Yeah,
it's
I
a
am.
turtle. They chose that name, of course, because turtles are known for their speed, strength, and agility. Nah, but turtles are cool.
Yeah.
This one is a lot simpler than the last two.
Come on,
It's a
man.
fairly typical horseshoe design, with the addition of very tall triple-decker seating on one of the sides. And on the other side, they've got this combination of outdoor seating and luxury suites.
This looks just there's so much going on. Again, this is not even got a stand here. I see you mentioned the horseshoe, which I am becoming more aware is very common, especially in college football. But this is just a building. Like, they could literally put more seats here to get more people in. But is this what they call a field house, like you did on that previous one? What's this stadium over here? This looks like another sort of indoor stadium, possibly. This just looks like a big building. This is like so much going on here. It's a lot to take in, but a lot of
cool,
character
actually.
in this stadium.
I often note how some stadiums have an exterior that's reminiscent of a parking garage. But this one literally has a parking garage as the exterior behind the west end zone.
Good for
which is
tailgating.
very convenient.
Yeah, I like this too. This reminds me of the soccer team I support, Rangers. We have a big red stone stand. Even this stand looks very similar to like an old school soccer stadium as well. This must be quite an old, 1929. Yeah, you can kind of tell this has got. You can tell the history in the stadium already.
Nick Stadium, home of the Iowa Hawkeyes. It's named after Niall Kinnick.
Wait a minute, is this the team that have that tradition with the? Is this the Children's Hospital? I recognise the shape of this building. I think my thumbnail was from this angle facing up here maybe. And this is the team that have that tradition where they hold up their lights to help the sick children. It's a beautiful thing, but they play in such a beautiful stadium. Really, it makes sense for a team like that.
I believe it's the only college stadium named after a Heisman Trophy winner, which is very surprising. And yet they've got one that's named after a beaver called James.
Oh, yeah.
This sort of design is somewhat uncommon in college football, given that it's made up of 4 individual stands that aren't connected.
Yeah, that's why it reminds me of
But
a soccer
those stands
stadium,
do
maybe.
have quite a traditional look to them, with a red brick facade for the most part. But what the stadium's most well known for can't be seen from the outside. The visitors' locker room is completely pink, which is done to put the away team in a passive mood. I mean, how fired up can you get when you're surrounded by pink?
That's true, right?
It also has
And that reminds me of things that happen in soccer. Like a lot of teams, like maybe not so much these days, but in the 80s and 90s, used to do a lot of things to the opposition locker rooms. Like they would, in the winter, turn the the heating off, so the rooms are freezing. Or in the summertime, or like when it's warmer, turn the heating right up so the players are sweating too much, or they're playing music through their room. Different things. Tell me if that sort of thing happens in American
has been
football.
known to increase their concern for having their nails broken. It even extends to the bathroom, which might not be in the spirit of sportsmanship,
That was like the back
but
rooms.
it is kind of funny. I wonder what would be crossing the line. Could you constantly have K-pop music playing in the rooms? That's like the audio equivalent of the color pink.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, to be honest, I don't even know what it sounds like, but just look at them. Memorial Stadium,
Just
home of the
abusing
Illinois
K-pop while we're
Fighting
at it.
Illini. This one's a little different. It has a very elegant neoclassical design, particularly the
It's
exterior.
almost rectangle.
It looks like
Whoa,
something
I
you'd
like
see
that.
in the Ivy League. In fact, it kind of looks like a combination of Harvard Stadium and Franklin.
Yeah, look at that. Come on.
Field.
That's what we're talking about. That's the one
Something
I've
that's
seen on a
quite
previous
fascinating
video.
about
Love
this
that one.
stadium is that during construction, way back in the 20s, heavy rain caused one of the bulldozers to sink into the field. They decided that it wasn't feasible to remove it, so it remains there to this day.
Really?
Yes, it's tragic, but at least the bulldozer driver was able to memorize the owner's manual in English, French, and Spanish before he died from asphyxiation. He's a quick learner, although he did have a bit of trouble with the Japanese section. I am of course joking, nobody was buried alive with the bulldozer, but I do really like this stadium.
Yeah. It's like quite minimalist and sleek.
Memorial
Oh,
Stadium,
this is-
home of the Indiana Hoosiers.
This is it, man.
First impressions are that
My first impression, look at the size of that stand. That is imposing. It's huge. I just love the shape of this. Again, it's got that horseshoe one again, as he mentioned, but this could be one of it's just like one straight stand all the way around.
this stadium isn't anything out of the ordinary. And then you look behind each of the end zones. To the south, there's a miniature version of the field,
Oh yeah.
and to the north,
Why?
you notice a spectacular cathedral or castle-like building. Stunning. Although, as with many college stadiums, the southern end zone was recently expanded. So now it looks like this.
Oh.
Sadly, the little baby field was crushed. Yes, it's tragic, but it was able to memorize what concrete smells like before it died from asphyxiation. The interesting thing about this stadium is that those huge stands to the east and particularly to the west, they've been here since the stadium was built. Except there was literally nothing else. It was just
Whoa.
grass behind each end zone.
I actually like
I
that.
kinda like that.
Yeah, I've never seen anything like that before.
Memorial Stadium, home of the Nebraska
Steep
Cornhuskers.
this stand is here.
For being just
high
humble
must that be?
Cornhusker folk, they've done quite well for themselves.
I like the
They've built themselves a magnificent stadium
Walkway
with
shape.
grand facades on each side. Very impressive.
Whoa.
On the inside, it looks just as good.
If this was in the UK, that would be a listed building. It's just the architecture, very classic.
And the eastern stand
stylish.
technically has 5 tiers of seating, which you certainly don't see every day. And behind each end zone you have these huge stands, which look pretty cool. And I suppose I should mention that on game day, the stadium itself becomes the 3rd biggest city in the great state of Nebraska. Although it's not a city, it's a stadium within a city. Nebraska doesn't have many sizable cities, I think, is the main point. Because as the legendary Nebraskan poet Douglas McNugget once said,
Douglas McNugget.
"Can't grow corn in a concrete jungle." So true.
What I've got to say so far about all these stadiums is they've got absolutely fantastic individuality. Like, no stadium is similar. They're all so different. All got such unique architecture and design that you can just tell they've got so much personality. Like, being like an away fan and going to different stadiums, it would just be amazing because you're experiencing so much different environments. Like when you go to like a lot of soccer stadiums, I think a lot of the modern stadiums just feel the same. Like there's like no real differences. These are awesome to look at.
Michigan Stadium, home
Yeah, I've
of the
seen this one
Michigan
before.
Wolverines. Let me start out by mentioning
empty,
that
it
it's
looks
the
great.
3rd biggest stadium in the world and the biggest outside of Asia. So that
The 3rd biggest stadium in the world is a college football stadium. And look at that, that's the most beautiful one inside so far. That's just seats. That's just atmosphere that's being created. There's no space missing there, man. They're fitting as many people in there as they can. And Michigan fans are pretty wild.
that's fairly impressive in itself. But the stadium's sunken design means that from the outside, you'd hardly notice that the stadium was
Yeah,
anywhere
that's
near
true.
that size. The design, although it looks pretty good, is very, very simple. It's just a single-tiered bowl
Simple
with
but
skyboxes
effective.
on either side of the field.
The big M there as
In fact, the most unusual thing about it is that it's almost perfectly symmetrical,
yeah, it is.
an anomaly in college football.
Mm.
The stadium holds numerous attendance records, as you might expect, including the largest college football crowd that wasn't held in a NASCAR track, which was a little over 115,000.
What?
Ohio
This one as
State.
well. I know Michigan and Ohio are big rivals, but they've got to have 2 of the best stadiums, not just in college football, but 2 of the best stadiums in the world. Look at this one as well. From the outside, stunning, that white brickwork, the shape of it, with the symmetry comes from here, but that one big stand here, just overlooking that pitch.
Home of the Ohio State Buckeyes. You see, I know that a sunken
big archway
field
here as
design
well.
is more cost effective, and I guess it would be safer if an earthquake were to occur. But you've just got to love an imposing exterior like that.
Yeah.
Just look at it. It's a fortress. I'm surprised there isn't a drawbridge. That would be pretty cool. Actually, this little section was
Yeah, look at this entrance. I've never seen anything like that in another stadium.
inspired by
before.
the Pantheon in Rome.
Okay, yes.
But the
that's
entire
true.
stadium itself was clearly inspired by something less opulent, that being the shoe of a horse. In fact, before the southern end was filled in, it was the king of all horseshoes. Now, it technically isn't a horseshoe stadium, even if it is its nickname. But
Yeah,
one
that's
thing
its
that
nickname.
isn't in doubt is that it's a very impressive stadium. I really do like it.
Michigan and Ohio, great stadiums.
Ross-Ade Stadium, home of the Purdue Boilermakers. That is a very specific nickname, but I like it. You've got to be tough to make a boiler. Well, perhaps not these days. The stadium, as you can see, is that rudimentary single-tier horseshoe style that you see here and there. It's probably the simplest stadium in this conference, but for some people, that's ideal. But the stadium's south end zone is a little unusual.
I like how
This
they're
section
sunken
used to
like
have
that too.
bleachers, but I guess it's just this guy's private parking space now. Ryan Field, home of the
Come on,
Northwestern
man.
Wildcats. Now, this one's got a bit more going on.
Yeah.
It's
this
another
big
one
wave
with a
stand here.
fortress-like grand entrance.
Why have college football stadiums all got these like huge grand entrances? They're so magnificent. They really put like modern architecture to shame a little bit, just because they're just get like, you don't see anything like this in any
With
other
two
place.
big white towers that can be seen from inside the stadium. It's the smallest Big Ten stadium in terms of seating capacity, and some of that seating is a little strange. The main stand's upper deck curves both from the bird's eye view and the side-on view, which is quite
yeah, that's
uncommon.
true, yeah. It goes up
And what's with
down.
this section? It seems like they should have just continued with the curve.
Yeah.
Dunno, but I'm sure there's
What's
a
this
reason.
building here at the
It's
bottom?
definitely a unique stadium, you've got to give it that. Sheer Stadium, home of the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. There's no obvious medieval-inspired architecture with this one, it's all fairly normal on the outside,
Apart from these little
but it
red
does have a
buildings
cannon,
here.
however, so that's good.
Cannon?
It's fired when the Scarlet Knights score, but I presume it also comes in handy when a drunken spectator runs onto the field. That actually sounds like fun. Something else that's a little unique is the red tin roof section that wraps its way around the north end zone seating.
Yeah.
As well as this little section of the south end zone that's actually the recruiting lounge. Other than that, it's a fairly straightforward design, but a good one. Spartan Stadium, home of the Michigan State Spartans. This stadium has a very clean design. It would even be perfectly symmetrical, just like the other stadium in Michigan, if it wasn't for this built-up side over on the west that was added in 2005. I like it. It's modern, yet traditional. And it's the only side of the stadium with a particularly good-looking exterior. The rest is a bit meh. It may come as a bit of a shock, but due to this section, the stadium is actually the tallest building in the city, provided you exclude those smokestacks over there. And to be fair, the city has a smaller population than the stadium's capacity,
Whoa.
so it's not much of a brag.
Yeah.
And finally, TCF Bank Stadium, home of the Minnesota Gophers. It's the newest stadium in the conference,
It's a great
although
entrance
you
here,
might not
actually.
be able to tell just by looking at it. They have tried to stick with a traditional college football aesthetic.
Yeah.
Kind of. I mean, there weren't really any designs quite like this in the 1920s, but the exterior is still fairly classical looking with the extensive use of brick and whatnot. You also get a decent view of the Minneapolis skyline from some vantage points, which is always good. The stadium is designed to be able to seamlessly expand in the future if need be, and you can just tell by looking at it where the additional seating might be added.
Yeah.
It's a great stadium to end with. And that's all for today's video. If you
Okay, man, really enjoyed that. That was great to see some more amazing college football stadiums. And yeah, of course, the thing I got to take from that is a lot of these are old stadiums, but they keep that tradition and they keep that style from that time, and I think it really gives them a lot of heart. I just got to respect that. These are the sort of stadiums I would love to visit, man. Not just for like watching a match, but just because I like architecture and to see these classic styles in a modern setting. Tell me what you think about all of them. Who's your favourite team from these, and what do you think about each of these stadiums? What was your favourite from these stadiums? Thanks.